Hey everybody, KC here. Fawn Germer is a writer and speaker who's out with a new book called Coming Back: How to Win the Job You Want When You've Lost the Job You Need. And actually, that subtitle doesn't say everything about the book. A lot of the book is about people whose lives and careers have been disrupted for a wide variety of reasons. And they're trying to figure out ways to be resilient and to have greater relevance so they can achieve what they want to achieve in the workforce. And we did a Zoom conversation in which we talked a lot about that, but we also talked some about how companies actually can be part of this process. That companies maybe need to do things that are not quite so algorithm based, maybe need to color outside the lines a little bit when it comes to hiring people, recruiting people, but also training people within the organization so they can bring more to the table, which would be good for the employees and good for them. It's an interesting conversation. It's a terrific book available on Amazon and wherever books are sold. And I hope you enjoy my conversation with Fawn Germer. Fawn Germer, welcome to Morning News Beat.
Well, thank you. Hi, Kevin.
So I love your book. Hold it up so everybody can see it. Let's see. Mine's on my Kindle. It's called Coming Back. Tell us about the book. What prompted you to write it?
Well, this started a number of years ago. I'm a leadership speaker, and I had been at a conference. And at the end, a bunch of senior executives retired to the lounge. And the more wine they drank, the more they started talking about what was happening with their careers.
That happens.
And it was the unfiltered version about how once they hit their 50s, they were starting to feel pushed aside and expecting to be pushed out, which some were. And I thought, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening to them like it's happening to my friends and my neighbors. I thought, oh, I've got this book I'm going to write on age discrimination and it how horrible it is. And I'm a former journalist, so I did so many interviews, 300 people, CEOs, executives, consultants, academics, professionals, and found out that my initial hypothesis was interesting, but it wasn't the book. The book was that many of us do things to sabotage our careers by unknowingly putting ourselves on autopilot. And that pilot is taking us right down the tank. So the more I got into it, the more I knew I had something that was going to impact many, many careers. And of course, COVID came and it changed the subhead, because half the book is really about how to stay relevant and viable throughout your career. So a lot of it's when you're still working. And then the other half is if you're not working, how to get hired. So that's what the subhead is, but there's a lot that will keep people on track because that was the intent, making you viable.
Yeah. And it is an interesting time because the traditional ways that people, especially in office settings, as opposed to working in a store, would have kept themselves relevant in terms of seeing people, being in people's faces, whatever it happens to be. Those are gone. We're all working from home. I mean, for some of us it wasn't a change, but for a lot of people that's been an enormous change. And the other thing that I thought was interesting about the book was that it wasn't, and it's funny you talk about the premise changing. There's a lot of 23-year-olds out there who are phoning it in thinking I got the job, it's not a problem, not realizing that we live in a world where good enough just isn't good enough, right?
That's a really good title. Maybe that's our next book, right?
I think it's been used, but
you stole it. It's stolen merchandise. All right, we'll leave that one alone.
Check it on Amazon. But it isn't anymore, right? I mean, I've used that line in speeches. Good enough's not good enough. You can't be middle of the road. You can't, I always say the middle of the road is where you find roadkill, right? That's the one thing.
You know where the roadkill is, which is interesting, is it's not even good enough. You could be the absolute best person for your job today.
Right.
And they don't care. They only want you if you're going to be the best person in 5 or 10 years. They only want to see where talent is going to be down the road because things are changing so quickly.
And that's a particular challenge that especially as you get a little older, that because the skills that come naturally to you just may not be appropriate or sufficient.
Right.
A world in which people um, have to be experts at other things. It makes me crazy. Sometimes I hear, I'll see people interviewed, and they'll talk about they don't really know how to use their iPhone to take a movie. And I'm not I'm not a brain surgeon. This isn't hard,
It's like,
right?
turn it sideways. Come
Yeah,
on.
hit a button, and it's like the way we've all mastered Zoom, a technology that none of us knew a year ago, and yet we've all gotten really, really good at doing it. And we're all sitting here around saying, "God, I wish I'd bought stock in that company back in March."
Right.
Right?
But honestly, it's not the phone and the Zoom, it's artificial intelligence, it's blockchain, big data, machine learning, it's robotics, and studying your industry and your job to see how technology is going to change it. And then independently being so curious and a lifelong learner that you're getting that information before someone at work tells you that you need it. Because it's particularly for people who are more advanced in their careers, they're making more money. And if they are not right up there with that tech, and you don't have to be a programmer, you just have to know how it's applied. But if you don't know that, somebody coming in fresh out of school, a millennial or a Gen Zer, will do it for far less money and do a better job. And so you have to be willing to say, I need to learn this, and do it in a way that doesn't freak you out, because there is a way to get caught up and get so that you can see the future through the technology that's coming. And companies really need to be drilling that in with the people of how to be responsible for their own relevance, and not just functioning on a Zoom call, but figuring out how you're going to use that to both brand yourself and help the company advance, and so many other things. It's the visionaries that are finding huge opportunity right now, and it's out there. You don't want to be somebody who just relies on the fact that you do a good job, you always beat your numbers, because that's not enough anymore.
Well, that notion of being a lifelong learner is just so important, and I think it comes natural. I mean, you come out of journalism, I come out of journalism. So when you come out of that background, there's something about intellectual curiosity, right? That's sort of what got us started doing what we were doing. So I'm
Yeah,
always reading stuff that I don't know anything about, but but but
the
the
tech
idea of
stuff,
people just get complacent. People think I made it, I got
it's not just complacency, it's intimidating and it's overwhelming. So years ago, I was in the newsroom and they were going to get these new machines that were going to hook us up to something that they called the information superhighway. And they kept talking about these machines and the information superhighway, and it was going to change everything. It was going to be this big deal. And they got the machines, and then the training came when I was on vacation. And I remember coming back and seeing all these reporters getting on the information superhighway and going back to their desk, and there was not a makeup training. And I didn't even know where to look up how to use the information superhighway. And I felt really dumb about it. And this went on a couple of weeks. And finally, I looked at the woman in front of me and I said, I don't know how to do the information superhighway thing. I was gone on vacation. And she goes, oh, come here. So she drags me over and sits me down and calls up this thing called a search engine and says, what are you working on? And I told her, and she said, type that in. And I typed it in. She says, okay, hit search. And then all these links came up and she goes, okay, open one of those. And there was an article. And she goes, okay, now
it.
you know how to use the information superhighway, which of course was the internet. But it seemed so frightening and intimidating and impossible. And it was easy. And I really have seen a lot of professionals in my coaching clients who are so behind because it just seems so big and hard to understand. And really, you just dumb it down until you get it. So, do you know what blockchain is? Well, of course you do, because of you know,
I
you
couldn't.
got it.
I understand it, but I couldn't explain it.
Okay, now in that industry, it's really important because of supply chain now. So blockchain is a bit of data that travels.
Right.
And because of that, that's really important with inventory and logistics and all these things. And I couldn't understand that to save my life. It's also the same technology that drives cryptocurrency, like
Right.
Bitcoin. Couldn't get it. So I read a bunch of articles, didn't understand it. Went to YouTube, because YouTube is always a good place to find things dumbed down for us dummies, right? Didn't get it. And I could not understand it, saved my life until I found a 4-minute YouTube video on how to teach blockchain to a 5-year-old. And I watched it and I was like, oh, and then I got it. So sometimes you start there so you can build up, but there's always a way to get caught up.
Well, it's interesting. I think it's become a truism, especially in the retail business, that every business can be disrupted, right? And that if you're running a business, you should expect it to be disrupted. And it seems to me that the other side of that coin is whatever you're in your career, you should assume you're going to be disrupted. Just
Right.
work on that premise that it's going to happen, and then work from there. Because if you start from that premise, at least you're preparing yourself for whatever the next chapter is going to be.
And it's not a negative thing, it's a positive thing. It's saying, oh, I'm just going to make myself smarter and more valuable. Well, what is wrong with that?
By the way, you also get to disrupt somebody else, right?
If,
you don't always have to be disrupted.
right. Yeah.
Disruptor.
Well, life is disruptive. That's right. The thing. We know that a skill set, when we got out of college, when I did, it was expected to last from graduation to retirement. And now they say your skills right now, it's between 2 and 5 years for every skill you have. So you have to be responsible for this, and you can't wait for your company to get you caught up. Right. It's on you.
Yeah. And in the same way that it used to be, you could go 7 or 8 years between store remodels. Now you can only go really 2 to 3 years. I mean, it's the same thing, just because you have to stay current if you're going to be effective. But the book focuses and is really good at focusing on how people need to be resilient, need to keep themselves relevant, and resonant for that matter, to employers, and so they can continue their careers. But let's talk about the employer side for a second. I mean, it seems to me that one of the things that companies could do, and you started to talk about this a minute ago, was a good company should figure, well, let's make sure our employees are continue to innovate their own careers, because if they do that, they're going to continue to innovate for us. And by the way, we're not going to have to hire new people and train them and all that sort of stuff. Is that something that companies need to be better at?
Absolutely. And it's like, hire me. I teach this because people need to be responsible for their own futures, their careers. They don't need to be babied by the employer. But the people who are more resistant to it are the people who don't understand what is expected of them. So if you lay out what they need to learn and how, they can do that. And you give them the tools that they need so that they are responsible for it. And there's a real important reason why you want to do that. And that's this. Millennials are a little less patient with their jobs, so they don't stay as long. What about 2 years and 3 months for the average millennial right now on a job? And that probably right now, while there's so many people out of work, probably is lengthening. But you get a good old tried and true Gen Xer or a baby boomer, and they will stay a very long time. Now, that's bad if they are not relevant and they're not giving you what you need. But if all you have to do is lay out for them, it's your responsibility. It is easy to figure out what's on the horizon. Here's what you need to search for. Here's a great place to take free classes online in your spare time that are fun and that will get you caught up, and then show them how to rebrand themselves. The results will be incredible. It will drive your bottom line. And these are loyal, true employees who want to work and want to contribute and feel a little bit cast aside because respect they thought they would get at this point in their careers. Let them earn it. They will deliver. And it's such a win-win because you got good employees. They've been there. You don't have to train them. And once it clicks with them, they get it. They're on their way.
I do think the notion of engagement is so important. And I think that employers, and maybe this is not as true anymore, but it probably depends on the company, because they're paying a wage, whether, and they're paying for benefits. They just work on the assumption that the employee is going to be engaged with whatever the company is. And it seems to me that, wages and benefits don't get that. right? You get, you get a certain amount of loyalty, but it only goes so far. And that it's critical for companies to sort of to do all the different things that will make an employee feel engaged, to
And value.
invest and feel invested in the company,
Right.
right? Because those are the things that matter in terms of performance. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
people who feel engaged with their companies and invested in their companies, they'll go the extra yard. They'll move mountains. But if
Absolutely.
you feel like you're just a number on a spreadsheet, well, not so much,
The good news, and every single thing you said is true. The good news is that good leaders know how to do that. Yeah, and as many leaders as I've interviewed for my books, the one thing that sticks out of what they say is their bottom line is it's the golden rule: do unto others. So that when they're doing that and valuing people and encouraging them, the results are huge. Problem is, things are moving so fast that they're forgetting that some things are falling through the cracks. And this is a big crack, which is saying expectations have changed. It's not personal. We're not coming after you. We value you. Here's how you can do what we need you to deliver. Because when you look at all the analytics that are being done on employees to rate the performance now and what they're going to deliver in the future, the one thing that's missing is that human leadership can bring out more than just a projection based on what's being delivered today. And so I know you have leaders who listen to this, and I just implore all of you to look at all of your people and say, how can I give them enough appreciation and love to make them want to do the few easy things they have to do on their own and take responsibility that will then in turn drive our bottom line and make all of us successful.
Forgive me, I forgot to turn off my phone. That's why I tossed it while you were talking. Who's a great leader that you talked to for the book? Give me somebody who you talked to
Well,
who you walked away and said, boy, they get it. Not just in terms of the people they lead, the companies they run, and also in terms of their own careers.
well, I interviewed a lot of CEOs and senior executives, so I don't want anyone to think that I love anyone more than another. But I have to say, our buddy Shelley Broader really nailed this whole thing, because Shelley is someone has this very storied career. I met her when she was a CEO of Sweet Bay down here in Florida, and then she went on to be a president at Michaels, and then went to Walmart and was in charge of one of their hugest regions and just killed it there.
And everything that wasn't the U.S. is sort of the
Yeah. Right, pretty much. And then goes on to Chico's FAS as the CEO. And here's somebody is the most relatable person you're ever going to meet. But the thing I liked about her was how she described our necessity to evolve and get on with things and what happens when people resist. And I thought that was a really great lesson, because it was those people who, when retail was starting to move online, and they're like, no, we just want bricks and mortar, and absolutely not. And how it's okay to have those initial feelings, but once you see the train is left, stop arguing over a losing cause and get on board and figure it out. So she gave a lot of really good advice in there, and it's that was a great interview.
Well, and Shelley, I told you this story before we started. I met Shelley when she was running Sweet Bay, and I can remember her telling me her approach to hiring was that you had to fill out an application which had all the usual questions, but it also had 3 questions that I've never seen asked by another foods company. What's your favorite food? What's your favorite restaurant? And what 3 items are always in your refrigerator? And her attitude was, listen, I can teach people to work with customers. I can teach people to understand retail. I can't teach them to love food. And I want people who work for me who love food. And I thought that was an understanding of food retailing that was actually sort of remarkable and amazingly unique in a business where food, you would think that would be that important to most people.
What's that ring?
It's my phone.
Is that your?
It's my phone.
Okay.
Sorry. This is like live TV, right? I'm just lucky the dog. I'm lucky the dogs aren't barking.
Is that me? See, that's what we're learning about Zooming.
Right. I forgot to turn the phone off. I'm sorry. But I think understanding that and understanding
Yeah,
what
right.
there are things you can teach people, but there are things you have to hire for. Maybe it's hire for passion.
Yeah, right.
Maybe that's would be how to sort of boil that down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or inspire it.
Yeah.
And it's
Well, this is good. Hold the book up again. One more time. It's called Coming Back, and it is available, I assume, on Amazon and in bookstores,
Amazon and all bookstores. Yes.
and
And
we will provide links. I think the notion of people having to continue to reinvest in themselves is incredibly important, but I think equally important is the notion that companies need to do this as well, because I think then at least they're all rowing in the same direction.
well, because if you don't, karma, right? Someday you're going to be the older one, and you do it now. Make a better world.
Absolutely. Hey, listen, Fawn, thank you so much for doing it, and we'll provide
Kevin.
links on the site, and we'll see you down the road.
You got it.
Take care.